Hey, welcome back, Strike Eagle fans. This is Not So here for part 2 of the programmable armament control system tutorial. In part 1, we talked about the air-to-air PACS and how you interface with the various air-to-air weapons. Part 2 is going to be all about the air-to-ground. So we're going to talk about how to set up the individual release programs for the weapons, as well as the combat jettison. So let's go ahead and jump right in. If you remember from previous time, main menu for the displays, select armament, and that will take you to the top level PACS menu. We went over all the buttons already for the display, so I'm not going to belabor those again. So let's go ahead and jump right to the air to ground PACS. So right here, this is the top level or the primary air to ground PACS, and the top row is where you're going to see the weapons will show up. Now notice right now the weapons have identified. If you remember previously I said that the air-to-ground weapons, at least dumb weapons, typically don't identify. The only ones that will self-ID with the jet when power comes on are smart weapons like JDAMs and so forth, and some of the other ones like GB-15, AGM-130, and so on. But most of the weapons that Strike Eagle carries, at least in the past, are all the non-self-identifying types because they don't have an actual connection to the jet. So what this is showing you right now is you could actually go into the squadron mission planning computer and program all the stores on the correct stations, and then when you load and read the DTM to the jet, it will actually identify, or it will actually label the stores. Now when the jet wakes up, it actually sees a quantity, so it knows there's something on that individual store. It just doesn't know what it is until you tell it. So there's two different ways. You can either load it through the DTM, or when you get into the jet, you can go to the air-to-ground load page, and then you would, if this showed up as not identified, in other words, you didn't have a DTM already programmed, you would see just the quantity down here, and then you would have to scroll through the different menus to find the weapon, and then you would actually assign each of the individual stations with the correct weapon, so the jet will know what's actually on that store. Otherwise, it doesn't know. If you were carrying Mark 82s, you could put some other weapon on there. The jet just would not know. It's really important that you get this correct, because the PACS actually talks to the jet in a lot of other ways for stuff like overload warning system, the OWS, to be able to tell whether it's approaching an over G limit. So it has to know that. It also uses it for CG balancing for the jet. So the PACS does a lot of different stuff for the jet beyond just the individual weapons themselves. But anyway, the one thing to note in DCS, so this is a DCSism, when you go into the mission editor and you assign weapons to the jet, it will act pretty much as if it's a DTM read, so that the weapons will already be identified, even though we're not technically doing a DTM. So it's kind of a DCSism that you'll understand once you get into it. So across the top, these are all the stores. So we've already identified them. Fuel tanks do self-identify, so you don't have to worry about those in most cases. So going around the screen, I'll just give you a quick overview. You've got the air-to-air button, so if you want to jump back and forth, you can go in and see what's loaded on the air-to-air side and do all the stuff we talked about in the previous tutorial. In this case, I've got two different AIM-120s. I've got a Charlie 5 on the left, a Bravo on the right, and then I've got a Lima AIM-9 Mike on the left. I'm sorry, AIM-9 Lima on the left and a 9 Mike on the right. So just some different flavors of weapons in terms of how that goes. So notice you can jump back and forth between the air-to-air PACS and the air-to-ground PACS pretty easily. So you can just go back and forth like so. So we'll stay here. Also note on the air-to-ground PACS, it also does still give you some essay of what the air-to-air loadout is in a generic sense. So it's just telling you that you've got 2 medium-range missiles and 2 short-range missiles, but it doesn't tell you what it is. You have to go into the air-to-air to see it. Also note, when you're in the air-to-air PACS, it does also give you the weapons loadout in the top, but you can't do anything with them. It's simply just an essay page or an essay line, so you can see what's actually there. So we'll stay here on the air-to-ground. You've got the gun, just like we talked about before. You can either get high rate or low rate. Remember, high rate is 6,000 rounds per minute, low rate is 4,000 rounds per minute. And you would typically set that as a technique only for air-to-ground strafe for the low rate. the main heart of this page is down here at the programming button down at PB5. So what this does, in Suite 4, you've got up to 4 programs, and I can just toggle that switch 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then back to 1. And what this does is allows you to program individual types of stores against a program, so when you get ready to deliver weapons, you've already got everything is already set up. You don't have to do it on the fly. You can do it on the fly if you want to, but it's far easier to program. It literally takes just a few seconds. The key here is when you start doing the programming, you can only have a single type of weapon loaded against an individual program. You can never mix different types of weapons. So in that case, I'm going to show you that we're going to go ahead and choose the Mark 82s for program 1. And notice as soon as I choose a weapon, the options start showing up down here at the bottom to choose. Notice if I try to add the GBU10 to that program, it will deselect the others because it's saying, hey dummy, you can't load different types of weapons. So we're going to go back to the Mark 82s. Notice it deselects the GBU10, and now we're back doing what we're doing. So this is going to, once I select a weapon up here at the top, it's going to give you 3 different categories of selections. It's going to have the delivery type. It's going to have the actual release type of sequence for the weapon itself, and then it's going to have the fusing options. So once I select the first weapon, I'm going to do the delivery type. So I have the option between CDIP and auto. If you remember, CDIP is a continuously displayed impact point. It's the exact same thing in other jets. It's called CCIP, continuously computed impact point. Same, just different name for the exact same function. So for program 1, I'm going to go ahead and select 2 Mark 80 or both stations with Mark 82s and select that as a CDIP station. Realize I can select one at a time if I really wanted to, so I could just have everything drop off of one CFT at a time. It's not really the ideal way to do it, because if you start expending all the weapons off of one CFT, now you're going to have a pretty big imbalance that you'll have to fix later. Just remember that the jet's not going to prevent you from doing it. It's just not necessarily a good idea. So in this case, I'm going to go back and select both. So I've got a CDIP program, and then now it's going to have the actual release sequence for the weapons themselves. So what these options are is 1 per station, means however many stations I have selected, it's going to drop an individual bomb off that station, and they will all drop at the same time. So in this case, since I have 2 stations, 1 per station, that means I'm going to get a pair of Mark 82s when I pickle the button exactly simultaneously. Step is just an individual bomb off of one or the other station. So even if I had all the stations selected and I have step, it's only going to drop 1 weapon for each pickle button press, and it's going to alternate through all the stations to keep the jet balanced. So in this case, if I have step, it'll drop 1 off the left CFT. The next pickle button press will go off the right. Third pickle button press will go off the left, and so on. It just alternates back and forth to keep the jet symmetry and center of gravity. Ripple single is now the string of weapons, so I can drop multiple weapons at the same time by pressing and holding the pickle button. And what this does is you get a string, and it's going to alternate off of the stations 1 at a time. So if I were to do a ripple single, let's say quantity 12, press and hold the pickle button, one's going to come off the left, second one's going to come off the right, then left, then right, then left and right, until all the weapons are expended, as long as I hold the pickle button down. And that's really important, that you have to hold the pickle button down for the entire time until you get the reticle to flash, and I'll show you that here in a second. Otherwise, it might interrupt the release, and it's a high chance of getting a hung weapon as it sends that release impulse and it gets interrupted. So just remember, ripple single means it's alternating weapons, and then ripple multiple is the exact same thing. You can choose up to a certain quantity of weapons, but when you press the pickle button, it's now going to do the normal string, but they're going to drop as a weapon off of each station that's selected at the same time. So in this case, since I have both CFTs and I have ripple multiple, and I press and hold the pickle button, it's going to drop a pair of Mark 82s, and then another pair, and then another pair, and then another pair, until all the weapons are expended. So let's go ahead and we'll go ahead and do 4 programs. So first one, we'll go ahead and do CDIP. I'll do a step program for that, and then I'll do nose tail, since we have low drag weapons. Program 2, I'll go ahead and do I'll choose both CFTs for the Mark 82s. I'll do an auto release this time. And let me go ahead into the air-to-ground master mode so you can see the reticle. So there's the auto reticle. This time I'm going to go ahead and choose a ripple single. I'll go ahead and plan to drop all 12, so we'll go with 12 there. Just realize you can toggle that button all the way through 9 and then back to 0, 1, and then this obviously only goes 0, 1, and 2 because you can't have more than 12 weapons of the same type loaded on there. I'm sorry, you could go up to, you can go higher, you just can't have a bigger than a 1 number. So let's go do 12 there, and then the interval over on this side is the individual spacing in feet between each weapon impact on the ground. So in this case, I'm going to go ahead and set 50 feet spacing, so that's 50 feet spacing between each weapon that hits the ground, and then you'd have to do some math to figure out the length of the entire string, depending on what your weapons effects that you want to achieve. It's basically just that times 12 minus 1 of those, because now you just have to do the math and see, and we can talk about that another time. Program 2, let's go back and do a CDIP. I'm sorry, let me go back to program 2, and then now we're going to set nose tail again for the low drag weapon. Let's go back to, we'll do program 3, we'll do the Mark 82s one more time. We'll do this as a CDIP program. Notice the CDIP pipper has now come up because I've selected those weapons. And this time we'll do a ripple multiple. This time let's just do 6 for the press of the pickle button. And where the fusing option comes in, this is really important for if, let's say, these were Mark 82 airs instead, or snake eyes instead of normal slick Mark 82s. The fusing option would also tell the bomb which high drag or low drag option to choose. So if I wanted to, let's pretend these were Mark 82 airs and I chose the nose option, that would give me the low drag configuration. If I chose either the tail or the nose and tail with a Mark 82 air or snake eye, that's going to give me the high drag option. So those are important to understand how that works. Again, because these are just slick Mark 82s, I'm going to go ahead and go nose tail. And then finally we'll go program 4. We'll choose the GBU-10 and realize you could drop that as a CDIP if you wanted to. Really no good reason to do it, but we'll go ahead and choose an auto, and we'll choose step again because we've only got the 1 there, and then nose tail. Nose tail is really important for the laser guided bombs because that not only pulls the fuse center arming well to arm the fuses, it's going to pull the battery squib to fire the battery to drive the seeker, as well as the rear fins to have the fins pop out. So it's important to select nose tail for the laser guided bombs. So that's it for the programs. So as you can see, as I step through program 1, 2, 3, and 4, it's retained all that information, and then I'll go back to program 1. Excuse me. Realize there's some other information here that's important. This is my loft program, and this is my T-arm program. This is the fuse arming. I'll talk about that when we get to the other page. And also notice, because I've got air-to-ground master mode, I've got air-to-ground combat is loaded here. If I had one of the training options selected, it would say air-to-ground training there. And notice if I change, let me go back to armament. Notice if I change master mode, it now changes that to air-to-air combat. I'll go ahead and change to air-to-ground combat on there. One final thing while I'm on this page, I want to show you right now we're master arm safe. I can tell that 2 ways. One, there's no gun cross in the HUD, but also I would, if I were master arm hot, I would have a PACS ready light down here in the right-hand corner. So let's go ahead and arm it up. So there's your master arm hot, and notice now I've got the PACS ready light down in the right-hand corner, and also the gun cross is shown up. So if I were to go safe again, that PACS ready light will go away. So I'll go ahead and leave it in arm for what we're going to do. There's this a long track and cross track, AT and CT. I'll talk about these when we get to the air-to-ground delivery page here in just 1 second. So that is everything for the main air-to-ground page. So let's back out. We'll go back out to the main display menu, and now we're going to go into menu 2, and we're going to choose the air-to-ground delivery menu. So realize on the first one, on the air-to-ground main page, the armament page, that's where you actually set the delivery functions up. The air-to-ground delivery page is now where you're going to set up some of the sub-menus or the sub-functions of that air-to-ground delivery for each program. Realize all these programs are already done. I can't change anything, so they're going to show up here. This is just a monitor, so realize none of these buttons are going to work. It's just to look and see what you have. So you can see now I can go through program 1, 2, 3, and 4, and these are going to retain all of the same information that I had previously, but this is now where I can program some of that other stuff we talked about, like the long track, cross track, and loft here. So these, the main button here is the min release altitude. This is not going to affect anything to do with the delivery, but this is going to drive the different HUD cues that you'll get when you are doing your delivery. So you'll have like a dud cue, a safe escape cue, and whatnot. So these are the things that will drive how those cues are displayed. Again, it doesn't affect the bombs at all because the bomb doesn't know what the min release altitude is. So in this case, let's say I'm doing a seat up to program 1, so I'm going to do a fairly low altitude release. We'll set that for min release altitude of, let's say, 1,000 feet. It's pretty low. And I'll go to program 2, and we're doing an auto release. And I'm going to do this as a loft, so let's do a min release altitude of 500 feet there. And then we'll go to program 3. This is going to be another seated program, and let's say we're going to do a much higher release here, so we'll go 6,900 feet MSL. And then finally program 4, this is a GBU-10, so we're expecting to be up high fairly well, so we're going to do this as a 10,000 foot release. And again, all that is entered through the scratch pad and the upfront controller, and then just entered here at the display. Okay, so now you can see that all those are retained. This reticle button right here, this is really not used. This is old school iron sights. This is if your bombing computer failed, and now I have to resort to over here where you see on the armament knob, you can go over to a manual free fall or manual retard release, and this would just be a purely manual, purely visual with essentially an iron sight reticle, and this is where you would put in the depression angle to depress the pipper for that. So think old school A4, F4, stuff like that back in the 50s and 60s. Again, I don't think I've ever even brought that up other than just to look and see what it looks like. Okay, so this is the main air-to-ground page. There's also a sub-menu for that page called the program page. So we'll go ahead and jump into that now. So once I go into the program page, this is now where I can now, again, program some of that other stuff that we were talking about. So here on the left, this is where I can select a loft against program 1. So we're doing a seat up, so obviously no reason to do a loft with a seat up program. So we'll leave that at 0. This is that a long track and cross track I talked about. What this is primarily for iron bombs, Mark 82s, Mark 84s. They found that some weapons had some inaccuracies in the delivery programs based on the type of release, whether it's a dive bomb, a level bomb down low, or a level up high. And they came up with a table that's in the Dash 34 that says for this particular release, put in these are essentially, think of these as correction factors. So they found, and I'm just making this up because I don't remember the exact table by heart, but let's say a 30-degree dive angle release, they were getting, the Mark 82s were dropping 50 feet short, so I can put a 50 feet long correction factor in there, and in theory that should zero out the errors and drop the bomb actually on the designated target. And the way you do this, again, through the scratch pad, so if I want to put a 50 feet long, I'd put it positive 50, type it in, and bang, that's right there. And then some jets, over time, they get a little bit bent for guys over G, and they might sling the bomb slightly left or right. So again, you can correct that. If, let's say I wanted a bomb to fall 15 feet right of my designation, I can type in 15, and bam, I've got now right 15 for that. If I wanted to go the other way, let's say on program 2, I wanted a let's say a minus 69 long track error, so I go shift minus here on the keyboard. So I use the shift function, I got the minus, and now we'll go shift 69 for that a long track. So now that's minus, that's short. And let's say I wanted to go 10 feet left. Again, then I would go the minus 10, type that in, and bam, now I have left 10 feet correction. Again, that's a correction factor from the designation point on the ground. The reality is the vast majority of the time you're never going to use this unless you have a known jet error. And back in the squadron, we used to, by tail number, we would have a book that would track for each type of delivery how the jet typically drops weapons. And you would go out there at the range and put in those numbers, but in combat we never used them. So we'll move on from there. Realize this is my program 2, my auto Ripple 12. Let's say I wanted to do a loft for that. So this is where I'd put in the number. Again, I can type that number in directly. So there's my 30-degree loft, and that will show up. And this T-arm down here is also where I'm now going to match the fuse setting that I set in the bomb during pre-flight. Realize, again, this is not going to talk to the bomb. This is simply just a setting that you'll use to make sure that your HUD cues are correct for your safe escape, or in this case, for your release time for the bomb. So it programs the correct cues in there. So let's say for program 2, I wanted a 6-second arm time, because that's what I set on those bombs for the Mark 82s. And then I'll go to program 3. This is my Ripple multiple CDIP program. I'll leave that at 0. I'll make these all 0 for the long track, cross track, and I'll make that let's say for whatever reason, I'll make that a 10-second arm time. And then I'll go to program 4. Notice when I go to program 4, a new feature popped up for laser-guided weapons only, and I'll talk about that here in a second. So again, I'll leave these at 0. Let's say I wanted to do just a 10-degree loft for the GB12 for whatever reason. I can do that, or if I toggle it, I can go to max range loft, and then that will give me the best computed loft for the weapon. But I'll go ahead and go back to 10 degree, so that's kind of a little mini loft that I might use for the GB10. That's more applicable for a GB24, but I'm just using that for illustration purposes. And again, let's say I had some long arm time for whatever reason, because I'm dropping the weapon up high. Let's say I set a 20-second T-arm on there. So again, this is not changing the fuse on the bomb at all. The weapon is not talking to the jet. The only time that would ever happen is if you had a smart PACS and you had a JDAM with one of the FMU 152 fuses and the like. So that's set. And then again, we talked about this new feature pops up only when I've got a laser-guided bomb. So this is the lasing feature for either auto or manual laze. So what this is saying, so a laze is auto laze, and if I toggle that is now manual laze. So what this says is auto laze, if I have the laser armed, which I do here on the pod, it says as soon as I pickle the bomb, as long as the laser is armed, it will go ahead and start firing the laser continuously until I turn it off. I can do the same thing here on manual laze, so essentially I do now have to turn the button on, so I can turn the laser on manually here, so you can see the laser flashing. And this is more for me, it will show up in the pod once everything's armed up, just as a reminder. I can also change the time, so if I wanted to put in, let's say I wanted to do a 12-second delay laze, 12 seconds prior to T impact, so I can type a number in here and put that in for manual laze. And now it would basically, I still have to turn the laser on manually if I have M laze, but it's just a timer reminder to go, oh yeah, hey dummy, turn that on when T impact turns to 12. If I were able to toggle that to A laze, now the laser is going to automatically come on at 12 seconds T impact for the weapon. Most self-respecting Wizzos never used the automatic laser. We were good enough that we remembered to turn it on at 12 seconds. But that's an option you can use if you wanted to. I never trusted it, but some guys used it and it worked, but most guys always left it in manual. So I'm going to do old school manual stuff. All this stuff here in the center, so the final thing I want to talk about is this is the ranging source hierarchy for the bombing computer, and this is all based on how it derives the height above target for the bomb. I'm not going to go into any detail on this. This is a whole separate tutorial in itself. This gets into all kinds of funky stuff I'm not going to talk about today. Just realize you have all these different ranging sources that you can choose. Right now it's an auto, so it's going to auto choose the ranging sources based on what's available. So for instance, if I didn't have a targeting pod or the laser was, or the pod was off, this would not show up in the list, but because it is, because I have a target pod, it will show up. I could turn it to manual, and now I can select a whole bunch of different stuff in specific orders and program it, but I'm not going to worry about that today, so we'll back out of that. So let me go back one more time. I'll go ahead and unselect the program page, and now what I want you to see is all these numbers will now match up and correspond to the program. So notice here I've got program 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then back to 1, and then I'll come back out to the main armament page. Okay, so the final thing here is once I have all that stuff set up, I've got a PACS ready light. Essentially, I'm ready to drop weapons. The final step here is to get my designation through whatever means. I can do it through a nav designation. I can update. I'm sorry, not update, but I can designate on a air-to-ground radar, RBM map, or a SAR patch map. Designate through the target pod. I could designate through the SIT. All kinds of different ways I can designate the target. In this case, I'll go ahead and do a nav designation. So I'll type in the target point, which is 2 point. And if you remember, the nomenclature there is 2 with a decimal. So once I have that, notice now that steer point turns, switches over to steer point 2, and now because I'm in air-to-ground master mode, that turns into a diamond. If I were to go back to air-to-air master mode, it goes back to a normal circle. But because I'm in air-to-ground master mode, I have a diamond, and because I'm in CDIP bombing mode, it just is a diamond with no azimuth steering line, and now I've got ground range to that target. If I switch over to a auto program, so there's my auto for my Mark 82s. Notice now I've got my auto reticle, and I've got my same diamond with the azimuth steering line here. And notice that is a 30-degree loft, and then you would have an additional thing for the loft is you would have a timer up here called T-pull, and that's going to basically tell you your time until it's time to start pulling up the azimuth steering line. So as soon as that T-pull went to 0, you would get a little hash mark here that would start basically at the pipper, and it would start working its way up the ASL from bottom to top. And the goal there is you're going to fly and keep the flight path marker as close as you can on that little tick mark that travels up the ASL while you're holding the pickle button down, and then the weapons will come off at the correct time once it's achieved that loft angle. And so again, GBU10 is the same thing. If I had that loft program, I would have the T-pull, and then once I got to that T-pull 0, I would get a loft cue to start pulling up on the weapon. So that's it in a nutshell. That's all the air-to-ground PACS and how you program it and how all the different delivery options work. Okay, so the final thing we're going to talk about is the combat jettison. So back to the main PACS menu. So notice we just stepped out 1 back here. So now we're going to select the combat jettison. What that is that interacts with the armament knob over here on the front cockpit panel. This is only in the front cockpit, so the pilot has to set this up. The Wizzo can program this, but the pilot is the only one who can actually jettison the weapons. So the way it works is I've got 2 jettison programs. I've got 1 push for program 1, second push is program 2, and I'll show you how to set those up. So the way it works is you would initially select your rack, store, or pylon. Rack is really not applicable anymore. This is way back in the early days when we had remember the old B model test aircraft with the MERS and TERS. So that would be the rack. We don't really have any racks that we can jettison. I guess the only one that we might be able to use as rack would be if we had a triple MAV rack out there. Again, I'm not really that familiar with it, but I think you could probably jettison that MAV rack using the rack. Store just means it's whatever store is loaded on that individual pylon. And then if I choose pylon, then I'm literally going to jettison the entire pylon and anything that's attached to it. This is, you have to be really careful with, because if you jettison, let's say, the wing pylons with the tanks, realize you're also jettisoning the air-to-air missile rails with it as well. So now you're going to lose all your air-to-air missiles that are on those pylons. So it's important that you understand what you're actually going to jettison. So right now, these are all the things that are available to be jettisoned, including the fuel tanks. So normally the way we do it is we're going to choose store, and then first push is usually the fuel tanks for program 1, and then I go enter, and then notice for combat 1 push, it's going to jettison the left and right store. Let's say for whatever reason, and normally I would do this if I wanted to jettison the tanks. Let's say they're empty, I've gone across the line and I want to go ahead and get rid of them, so I get rid of the drag. And then program 2 is where I'm going to get, this is kind of the oh shit button. Let's say I got jumped by a MiG, I'm in a turning fight and I want to get rid of all this weight of bombs, because I'm going to turn like a pig with 12 Mark 82s and a GBU-10. So this is now where I'm going to select store, and now I'm going to select all the weapons. And normally the technique is to also select the fuel tanks again as well, even though technically they should be gone with the first push, just in case for whatever reason one of them didn't come off, maybe you push the button too quickly and it didn't take. That way you go ahead and assure that they come off again on the second push. Press enter. And then notice now, basically all those weapons are going to be selected for the store. So that's it. That is it for combat jet. Once I have the program set, if I wanted to jettison something, I'd come over here and rotate this knob over here to selective jettison to combat, and then program. The first push is going to be the tanks, because that's program 1, and then the second push is going to be the rest of the stores that I have programmed here. Realize if I reset this, let's say I pushed it once to get rid of the tanks, and then for whatever reason, I'm not sure why you do it, but you went back to off and back to on, that resets the whole program, and now you have to push it twice again to get the rest of the stores off, because it's basically putting it back to the starting state. You do have another jettison feature here. You've got emergency jettison. And this is basically will jettison anything, any carted store, including all the pylons if they're actually carted with the jettison carts once power comes on the jet. So you could actually punch these off while you're sitting on the ground, and your crew chief, if you did that, would get very, very pissed off and probably beat the living shit out of you when you get out of the jet. So don't do that on the ground unless you want to cause a big drama. Anyway, so that's it for the air-to-ground PACS as well as the combat jettison. Hopefully that made a lot of sense, and happy to answer questions on the Discord. I'm sure that's going to generate a lot of questions on there. But again, the PACS is a really powerful interface to the jet, and it does a lot more than just programming the weapons. Remember, it also is super important that this is programmed correctly for your overload warning system, so it is able to understand and program the Gs correctly for what is left on the jet, as well as the symmetry and the center of gravity calculations for the jet as well. All right, and then one final thing, I'm going to leave you with a teaser over here on the target pod. I want to show you up here in the HUD, you've got a cool little target line of sight box that you can see that will move around with the target pod. Target pod is working really nicely, and we're going to have a future tutorial on that as well. So everything's working nicely, and we will talk about that soon. Anyway, Not So's out. Hopefully that helped a lot, and we'll talk soon. See you, bye.